Well, hello everyone. How are you doing this fine day? Hope you're enjoying your week. Oh god. Okay, so you ever go in your fridge to look for something to eat and then you realize all you got is a bunch of leftovers, but none of them leftovers are enough to make a full meal by itself? There's just little bits of each one. So you just take all the different leftovers and you throw it all in a bucket and mix it together to try to make some kind of meal out of it. But then you realize after you mix it all together that none of it really goes together. And while it wasn't a whole lot individually, once you mix it all together, it was enough to feed a large family. And now, even though you don't really want to eat it, you kind of have to, because literally nobody else on earth is going to eat this fucking monstrosity that you created. And you can't eat it a little bit at a time because you mixed liquidy shit with shit that shouldn't be liquidy, and now it's going to get all soggy if it just sits in the fridge. So your only option is to throw out this bucket filled with fried chicken and biscuits and gumbo and shrimp and ramen, some peaches that were about to go bad, a couple of Fig Newtons, some cornbread, stale ass cereal that someone left in the box that wasn't enough to actually make a full bowl, mixed peas and carrots, meatloaf, grits, and Italian sausage covered in mozzarella sauce. Or you just throw caution to the wind and eat that shit and hope it doesn't fuck you up too much. But it does. No? Y'all never done that? Yeah, me neither. So today we're doing a new challenge. We're doing, fuck are we doing? Game of Thrones. That's right, Game of Thrones. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Rouga, why are we talking about Game of Thrones? A show that, while it was absolutely fantastic, it had kind of a disappointing final season and then was just canceled before it even had a real resolution. Doesn't make sense to even have this in a survival challenge. Well, I would say, look guys, season 5 wasn't quite as good as season 4, I agree. And it really sucks that we never got any seasons after that, but this was a damn good show, and I don't think it should just go into monotony because we never got an ending to the story. Just like everybody else, I would like to live in a world where this fantastic show did actually get a proper ending the way it was meant to. But we don't live in that world. So we do what we gotta do. Now, we'll be changing up this challenge a little bit from my usual stuff. Normally, I put characters in here, and they have all their powers and abilities, and I'll usually put them in here at their absolute strongest. That's not really what this challenge is about. I'm gonna put a bunch of characters in here based on their strategic ability to overthrow governments, not based on their over-the-top superpowers or anything like that. They're basically gonna be completely stripped of all their powers. Also, before I forget, the debate streams. Every Saturday evening at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, we hold a live stream debate. You can come in there, you can debate against me, you can debate against other people who aren't me, doesn't matter. Sometimes I'll take the best debates, edit them together, make them a little more cleaner, and then release them as an actual video on the channel. So if you have some grievances with anything I said, you just like debating, you just want to stretch your skills, you just want to put some fools down, come on down to the debate stream, go up against some dudes. You might get your video put up, and then you'll have this massive audience that could just like cheer on how much of a beast you are. That's pretty fun, right? If you're interested in joining that stream, whether it's watching or actually debating yourself, go on down to the pinned comment, click the link, say you're interested, and then you'll get a Discord reminder of when it starts. And despite this intro, if you enjoy the video, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, and join the membership. Remember to join the membership, you get videos early. But I'll waste enough of your time. Let's get started. Okay, so what can I tell you about Game of Thrones if you don't know anything about Game of Thrones? It takes place in a world known as Westeros, ruled by a king by the name of Robert Baratheon. Robert Baratheon isn't a particularly good king, but he's not cruel or an asshole either. He just kind of doesn't really care about being king. He's just sort of chilling and like kind of not really enjoying being king, but everything's fine, everything's peaceful. One day he dies of totally natural, not at all suspicious means, and because of the rules of kingly succession, his son, who is a vicious little shit, ends up becoming king in his stead. That is until his Hand of the King, played by Sean Bean, discovers that his son is actually not his son because his wife was cheating on him with her brother, and all of her kids are not his. They're her disgusting incest babies with her weird brother. This leads Ned Stark to try and overthrow the incest baby shit and get a proper heir on the throne. But it fails and the incest baby shit kills him. And before you're thinking, well, hold up, you just spoiled the show. I feel like there should be a pretty solid rule in place if you watch anything ever that Sean Bean dying is not a fucking spoiler. If I told you that Sean Bean lived, that would be a spoiler. I mean, shit, in Lord of the Rings, Boromir's character dies at the beginning of the second book. But in the movies, they moved it to the end of the first movie just so they can ensure that Sean Bean doesn't live all the way through a movie. I swear, there's gotta be like a Cabin in the Woods style demon god thing that lives underground that we need to sacrifice people to, or else the entire world will come to an end, and Sean Bean just chose to be the sacrificial lamb, and that's the payment, that Sean Bean must die in every single movie. Anyway, killing this dude was a really fucking stupid idea, because he was War to the North, which basically means that he's in control of an entire small kingdom up north that rules over several other not quite as powerful houses as his own, but his own house is damn near powerful enough to go to war with the fucking royal family. So that's what happens. That war breaking out, as well as the incest baby shit's claim to the throne being challenged, ends up sparking basically every single noble family to rise up and try to fight for the throne. And then we get 5 seasons of various noble houses going to war and making excuses to kill each other so that one dude can sit on a super uncomfortable chair. And that's the whole show. While there is war in the show, it's not about the war. In fact, throughout the entire series, I think we only see like 2 battles, maybe. Most battles are actually skipped, and it's more about people plotting and planning and backstabbing and manipulating each other and sort of what happens behind the scenes, not necessarily these large, grand scale battles. And for this challenge, we're going to take a couple of characters, throw them in there, see who they would side with, where would they be, how would they fit in this world comfortably, what decisions would they make after this war kicks off in order to take the throne for themselves. Would they even necessarily fucking want the throne for themselves? Would they do something else? Maybe they'll have a smaller role. I don't know. That's what the video's for. Watch it and you'll find out. Stop asking fucking questions. First up on the chopping block, we have Sheev Palpatine. And yes, his name is in fact Sheev. So Sheev is sort of held up in the Star Wars community as being this ultimate high intelligence Machiavellian villain who plans everything years in advance and nobody ever sees him coming, and he just outsmarts everybody and completes all these goals. They just hold him on such a high pedestal to the point that many people think that he's one of the smartest villains in film history. I don't agree. I actually think he's pretty fucking clumsy. And yeah, this is gonna annoy people. Look, I just don't think he's all that smart. His plans aren't very good. They almost never succeed. And the few times they do is because the people he's going up against are fucking idiots. Like, let me give you some examples, right? He was able to, for the most part, overthrow the Jedi. We eventually found out that he actually failed to do that, as a lot of Jedi actually survived the overthrowing. But the only reason why the whole overthrowing the Jedi thing was even possible is because they willingly accepted having an army of clones that was created by Count Dooku, the apprentice of Palpatine, and it never once occurred to them that these clones might be loyal to the dude that made them. That's the dumbest shit ever. That would be like if during World War II, the United States allowed our entire army to be built by Hitler and then went to war with Hitler. I think when Order 66 happened, Revenge of the Sith, it was supposed to be like some big shock or something. I don't see how. Even as a child watching episode 2, I thought it was fucking stupid that nobody questioned how dumb this was. That army should have been wiped out immediately, and they should have started from scratch using the same cloning technology, but not use any of the clones that Count Dooku made. And then you have people saying that he was this great manipulator who was able to become the Chancellor of the Republic without anyone knowing who he was, despite the fact that everyone was trying to find out who ran the Sith. He was basically just hiding right under their noses. Super impressive, right? No, not really. The fact of the matter is that the only person that he actually successfully fooled was Anakin. And Anakin, I would argue, is extremely easy to manipulate. There is literally no one else that he was able to fool. The Jedi didn't trust him. The Separatists tried to betray him, which is why he has Anakin slaughter them at the end of Revenge of the Sith. And actually, this is an important thing that we have to go over. In the original 4-hour cut of Revenge of the Sith, before they, chopped it down to be able to fit it in theaters, there was a whole B plot line that followed the Separatists, and the Separatists basically building an underground army to go up against the Chancellor and the inevitable Empire, because they feared what Chancellor Sheev was going to eventually do. And a part of the Separatists was Padme. This was a big thing. She was playing a double agent, pretending to be with the Chancellor while also helping build this rebel army with the Separatists. Throughout that version of the movie, Anakin was supposed to slowly come to the realization that his wife is essentially betrayed him and the empire that him and Sheev were creating, and him fearing for that possibility is supposed to be a really big part of his character arc. In the final scene on Mustafar, after he kills all the Separatists, Padme shows up with Obi-Wan, confirming his fears that he's had for the entire movie, which is why he turns on her in this sort of moment of like pure anger, because it's like all of his fears come to the surface. But in the final cut of the movie, they cut all of this out. The whole Separatists are building their whole rebel army, and Padme being a part of it's not in the film. So when she shows up on Mustafar, he just kind of attacks her the moment he sees Obi-Wan, it seems a little odd. It doesn't even really 100% make sense why she would even know he's on Mustafar. I would actually really like to see that 4-hour cut, because I've seen a lot of behind the scenes stuff and images and scenes that were supposed to be in it, and it just seems like it would have overall been a better movie than what we got. There's also a whole alternate fight they did with Anakin and Obi-Wan where all of the choreography is completely different, and in my opinion a lot better than what we ended up getting on Mustafar. It actually has Anakin basically whooping Obi-Wan's ass for like 10 minutes straight, with him barely being able to survive, and then only winning at the end because he had the high ground, which is something that the theatrical version doesn't have, because they almost seem even for most of it, even though that doesn't make any sense, because we see at the beginning of the movie that Anakin is pretty easily able to defeat Count Dooku, and Obi-Wan didn't stand a chance against Dooku, so really Anakin should be more powerful than Obi-Wan at this point. But again, for whatever reason, they completely redid the fight, and it just, I don't know. I would like to see the 4-hour version. But anyway, my point is that basically everybody knew that Chancellor Sheev was bad news. There wasn't really anybody who served him that wasn't conditioned to serve him via some kind of sci-fi bullshit like the clone. The only reason why the Jedi and the Separatists and all of the other people within the government who did not trust Chancellor Sheev didn't murder or assassinate him is because that's just not the way that they work. They are a republic and had to follow the rule of law to remove Chancellor Sheev from his position of power. That's not the case in Game of Thrones. If anybody starts questioning his loyalty or thinking that he has his own sort of plans of takeover, he will be executed immediately. And because in this scenario we're not giving him all his force powers and shit, it's literally just his general, skills with manipulation and playing the Game of Thrones, he's not really gonna have any way of fighting back against that. Now, it is possible that a lot of this is just due to the fact that it's technically a children's movie, so they're not going to go into all of the different details of how he holds power. I'm not even sure that we know how he became Chancellor in the first place. There just is no getting around that Sheev is only really in power because the characters around him make stupid decisions. I mean, think about when the Jedi finally does find out that he's a Sith, right? Anakin tells Mace Windu that he's the Sith they're looking for. What does Mace Windu do? He jumps into a ship with like 5 dudes and goes to arrest him. They fail, they all die, which is dumb. They only sent 5 people, because Sheev is supposed to be the strongest Sith alive at the time. They know this when they go there, but also they didn't tell anybody else that Sheev was a Sith. So after they all die, Sheev can then spin the story as the Jedi tried to assassinate him instead of he was a Sith that they tried to arrest. Sheev should have been outed immediately as a Sith, publicly to the world. After his failed arrest, he should have had to go on the run as a fugitive. But because Mace Windu didn't tell anybody, this was completely unknown to the majority of the populace, and he was able to spin it to make it seem like the Jedi was trying to overthrow the government. Yeah, I'm sorry, I like Sheev too, I like Star Wars, but there's a reason why they call Star Wars a dumbed down version of Dune. When you really start to look at the plot and how it unfolds, it doesn't make any sense. Characters make really dumb decisions across all of these movies, and Sheev does not stand a chance in the Game of Thrones. He's kind of sort of supposed to be a character that's on the lines of Littlefinger, but he doesn't have the same manipulative skills that someone like Littlefinger has. So he's just going to be a shittier version of Littlefinger. And he will very likely get executed pretty damn quick. Next up, we have Azula from Avatar the Last Airbender. Daughter of the Fire Lord, Azula is an absolute perfectionist. In everything in her life, she must be perfect in every way. This is everything from her fighting skill to her firebending to her education, everything, doesn't matter. And unsurprisingly, this leads to her being a very well-rounded and skilled character when it comes to the Game of Thrones. Now, sadly, throughout the show, we only actually see her play the Game of Thrones one time, and that was in Ba Sing Se against Fang. But in that episode, or actually I think it's kind of a few episodes, she does do it fairly well. And I will give her credit where credit is due. Fang is a lot better at playing that game than anybody that Sheev had to go up against. Like, Sheev was just going up against a bunch of fucking tardos in comparison to the stuff that Azula had to face. Having said that, Fang's the only person that she's ever had to play it against, and Fang isn't that good. Like, he's fine. I mean, Fang was able to take control of all of Ba Sing Se and basically rule it as a false king, but the only person he had to compete against him was the actual king, who was not only naive, he is an idiot. The first time Fang ever had an actual threat to his throne in the form of Azula, he was completely fucking throttled. It wasn't even close. Even Azula mentioned how she didn't even think of him as being an actual threat. And that kind of brings us to the first real weakness of Azula in this particular game, and that is, she's really the only person like this in the whole show other than Fang. Throughout all 3 seasons of the show, she's not just shown to be the most manipulative and the most intelligent, she's the only manipulative character outside of Fang, and again, she's considerably better at it than he is. No one else in the series is shown to be even close to her intelligence. She's never had to spar with an equal. And if she gets moved over in the Game of Thrones universe and loses all of her firebending powers in the process, she's gonna run into a bunch of characters that are just as good at it as she is. Tywin, Tyrion, Littlefinger, the Spider, all kinds of characters who are just as smart and far more experienced at playing these types of games than she is, against far more skilled opponents. But I will give her credit where credit is due. In her universe, she's considered one of the best. The scenes of her doing it, she does do a fairly good job. So I'll put her in this universe and just assume that she will be up there with the top tiers of the Game of Thrones characters as far as playing the Game of Thrones. Until you run into her second weakness, and this one is quite devastating, and that is, she rules everyone by fear, and when fear no longer works, her entire view of the world is completely shattered. The show leans pretty heavily onto the idea that she is a 14-year-old girl who is kind of pretending to be older than she is. She is shown to use fear as a weapon to control everyone around her, including her best friends, and when that fear no longer works and her best friends betray her, she goes absolutely fucking insane. She can't focus properly, she starts to get paranoia about everyone around her wanting to betray her. She starts making very, very stupid decisions. And there is absolutely no way that she will ever be able to sit on the Iron Throne with this great of a weakness, because in the Game of Thrones universe, she is going to be betrayed constantly. Everyone is. Almost all the characters that she's going to have to spar against will not be afraid of her. The soldiers that she commands will not be afraid of her. They take the time in the show to point out that the Dai Li, the most elite warriors in all of Ba Sing Se, in all of the Earth Kingdom arguably, are terrified of a 14-year-old girl. This is a massive problem for her because she's a character who rules by fear going into the Game of Thrones universe, where literally no one will be afraid of her. Who is going to be afraid of Azula here? Are any of the Lannisters going to be afraid of Azula? No. Are the Starks? No. Are Dorne? No. No one's going to give a shit about a 14-year-old girl with martial arts abilities who's admittedly pretty smart and prepared to kill them. That's not an unusual thing here. And let's be honest, a lot of the reason why people are scared of Azula is because she is the princess of the Fire Nation who is at war with the world. She's the daughter of the Fire Lord. People are scared of her because of Daddy, not necessarily because she's so fucking terrifying. I mean, don't get me wrong, she's evil and she could be intimidating at times, but if she wasn't backed by the largest military in the entire Avatar universe, nobody would be scared of anything she had to say. She has to have that force behind it. And if you're putting her in this world, even if we give her a sizable force, she will not have that same effect. So the main tactic that she uses to manipulate people will not be of any use here. And if she makes just one wrong move, tries to intimidate just one wrong person that she should not try to intimidate, the Game of Thrones universe has zero issues with brutally murdering a 14-year-old girl and posting her head on a spike outside the castle walls for everyone to see. I think she will do okay at the start, but her weaknesses will come out very, very quickly, and she will be dead by late season 1, early season 2. Next up, we have Eren Yeager from Attack on Titan. And this one's interesting because it's the first person we put on this list who doesn't really want power or to overthrow anyone. Both Sheev and Azula are selfish characters that want more for themselves. At no point in Attack on Titan does Eren ever make a move to take power solely so that he can become more powerful. There is the whole thing about the Jaegers at the end overthrowing the Paradise government, but you end up finding out this is all smoke and mirrors and he's just trying to make it look like he's overthrowing the Paradise government, when in reality he's doing it to pose himself as the bad guys so that he could wipe out a bunch of people and convince the world the people of Paradise are actually good guys. It's like a whole thing in season 4, don't worry about it. Point is, if we take Eren and we chuck him in the Game of Thrones universe, it's not going to be like Azula and Sheev where they're waging war and trying to outsmart their opponents in the Game of Thrones. Eren won't even really play the game that much. Like, if we give him his sort of Game of Thrones equivalent to what he had in Attack on Titan, where we're just giving him an island somewhere and he just has his own people, the only thing Eren cares about is the people of Paradis. So if we give him sort of a Game of Thrones equivalent where he's on an island, we'll even call it Paradis, and he's just trying to defend his island and live, peacefully there, and then people start coming and invading his island, that's really the only thing he's going to have an issue with. Like, I don't see a world where he goes to war with the Lannisters or the Starks. I think it's far more likely he might go to war with the Greyjoys, because the Greyjoys are raiders. That's what they do. They go to different islands, raid, steal, kill people. If they do that to Paradis, Eren's going to have an issue with it. Eren is going to respond, and that response is going to be so much worse than anything the Greyjoys are capable of doing. Eren's character in Attack on Titan is defined by, one, his hatred of the enemies of Paradis, massive hatred, but also by his willingness to be unbelievably cruel and vicious to those enemies. He is technically the good guy of the story, and he is perfectly okay with slaughtering countless people, men, women, children, doesn't matter, for the safety of his home. In the Attack on Titan universe, he kills 80% of the population of the planet just so the people on his island of Paradis can live. If the Greyjoys sack his island a couple times, that's gonna be that. He's gonna send a bunch of people across the ocean to the Iron Island to chill out there for a couple of months as they find out all the different stuff they can about the island, where all the major weak points are, where do they grow their crops, what do their animal stocks look like, where do the most civilians live, whatever they possibly can about the Iron Islands. And he is going to plan an assault on those islands so over the top and ridiculous. It is going to be such an unnecessary response that no one in all of Westeros has ever seen anything like it. Because Eren is unlike any character that exists within Westeros. All of these characters want things. They want land, they want to colonize, they want to tax people, they want slaves, they want more power. There's always something they want. Eren doesn't want any of that. He has no interest in taking over the Iron Islands. He just wants to kill everyone there. That type of leader does not exist in Westeros. Westeros doesn't have genociders. I mean, I guess the closest thing they have is the ice zombies, but in the 5 seasons of the show that we have, they don't really do anything, and they're easily the least interesting part of the show. So I don't think if the show continued that they just, put all of the focus of the show on this least interesting aspect of the show, because that would be fucking stupid. But yeah, that's really the only thing that I could see Eren actually doing, is going to war with people who specifically come and start fucking with Paradis. I definitely see him going to war with the Greyjoys since they are raiders, and I see him winning pretty easily because while they're good at raiding, Eren is significantly more intelligent than anyone with the Greyjoys is. He's way better at tactics than they are, and he's a lot better at thinking outside the box where they just kind of throw a bunch of ships at things and blow them up. They're not the most skilled at warring. Outside of that, I don't really see any of the other houses wanting to fuck with this tiny island as dude. Like, all he would want is his independence. Just leave him alone and you'll be good. I don't really see it being worth it for them to have this many of their people die so they can take out one small island. Because Eren will make that fight super not worth it. And while characters like Azula are shown to be good at tactics and things like this, it's sort of a rigged match since Azula in her own series has a much bigger army than anyone else she goes up against. That's not the case for Eren. Eren is always the underdog. He always has a smaller army, and he still pretty much always wins. Because he has two things that no one else in Westeros has. One, he's willing to do things that no one else is willing to do, and causing casualties that no one else is willing to cause. Yes, that includes some of the highest casualty characters in the entire show. And two, it's basically impossible to predict what he's gonna do because he doesn't want anything for himself. A big part of playing the Game of Thrones is realizing what people want and using that to your own benefit to overcome that person. We've seen in Game of Thrones, like with the High Sparrow character, when someone doesn't want anything, that's basically like kryptonite this whole fucking series. So in summary, what I think is going to happen with Eren, because he doesn't have the rumbling or Titans on his side, it's not like he's going to wipe out all life in Westeros. But I do see him holding his ground. I do see him having his own independent island, possibly making a deal with some larger government body. Like maybe he'll make a deal with the North and become a colony as long as they leave him the fuck alone. Well, actually, no. None of the great houses are going to take the time out of their day to go and make Paradis a colony when the Lannisters, Baratheons, and Starks are all at war for the throne. The only people that actually will be able to deal with them is the Iron Isles because they're right there. So if any sort of colonization is going to happen, it's not going to happen until after the War of the Five Kings has been dealt with. And I don't think any of these houses are going to be the slightest bit interested in making a deal with the Greyjoys to help them invade some random island out in butt-fuckington ocean. So yeah, the Greyjoys are basically going to have to deal with this on their own, and I just don't think that they're smart enough to outthink someone like Eren. What's way more likely to happen is that Paradis is going to go to war with the Greyjoys. They're probably going to do very well, even possibly win, and then what is left of Paradis will have no choice but to be dragged into the conflict with the rest of the 5 houses. Likely being some form of support to someone at some point, but mostly being left alone once the Greyjoys are dealt with. Last up, but certainly not least, we have Yoshii Toronaga from Shogun. Yes, Yoshi like the Mario lizard. And no, this is not a Sheev situation, because Sheev is a stupid fucking name, and Yoshi's awesome. So if you've never seen Shogun, sucks to be you. It's really good. It's the best show of 2025. What are you doing? Stop watching this, go watch Shogun, come back. But basically, it's a story based on a book that's historical fiction that loosely tells the tale of how the Edo period came into be, and follows the story of a bunch of different characters, but the best character would be Yoshii Toronaga. The story revolves around the events that happen after the death of the Emperor, which is basically that it creates a power vacuum, and then a bunch of different clans start fighting each other to see who is going to be the next ruler of Japan after he's gone, which I say it's a bunch of clans fighting each other, but really it's just Toronaga versus like 4 other fucking clans. He doesn't like the route they're going with the country, and he wants to create an era of peace, so he stands against them. On top of that, the Catholics and the Protestants are at war with one another, and they're sort of fighting each other for the soul of a bunch of different countries, including Japan. And Toronaga finds out about this, so now he has to deal with all this bullshit. And it basically just follows all the different chaos that erupts as all these different factions are vying for power. Actually, kind of sort of similar to the plot of Game of Thrones, which makes sense because Toronaga would be a fucking fantastic character to throw in the middle of the Game of Thrones universe. In fact, if you did throw him in the Game of Thrones universe, he would fucking win the Game of Thrones. Toronaga is fucking unbelievable at playing the game. I mean, in all honesty, this should be pretty obvious since Toronaga does fucking win the game. Like, handily. It wasn't even close. Here's the thing, if you look at Toronaga's character and all of his strengths and weaknesses and all this different kind of stuff, and the way he goes about dealing with his conflict, you begin to realize that when it comes to playing the Game of Thrones, Toronaga doesn't really have any weaknesses. The Game of Thrones universe is really big on having all these different characters get thrust into this game and then using all of their personal weaknesses to lead to their downfall, right? So you get characters like Robb Stark, who's literally never lost a battle and is the best battle commander in the entire show, still getting wiped out because of some very poor decisions that he made leading up to his death, including not marrying Walder Frey's daughter after he promised to because he fell in love with this doctor lady, as well as executing the head of a house that supported him because that person broke the law due to his sense of justice, when in reality he should not have executed that person because it made an entire house that followed him turn his back on him in the middle of a war. And this is throughout the whole series. You constantly have characters having their own personal beliefs and feelings and all this different stuff getting in the way of them accomplishing their goals and getting them killed. Toronaga doesn't really have anything that is obviously a weakness. So far, there's only 1 season of Shogun, but that's enough time for us to know quite a bit about Toronaga. He's a man that trusts literally no one, not even family and friends. He understands and even expects that every single person around him will always act in a way that benefits them the most. At the end of season 1, Toronaga is about to execute a man who has betrayed him at least 4 or 5 times throughout the season at this point. Before the man's about to be executed, he asks Toronaga all sorts of questions about his plans for the future and all sorts of other things, and Toronaga reveals things to him that he doesn't mind revealing because this motherfucker's about to die anyway. And this guy learns Toronaga's whole Machiavellian plan to take over the entirety of Japan. After Toronaga blows this man's fucking mind by dropping all of these massive reveals on him, he asks Toronaga how it feels to shape the wind itself. And Toronaga answers, "I don't shape the wind, I study it." I cannot think of a more perfect encapsulation of Toronaga's character than that line. Toronaga is an insanely patient man who will sit there, wait, and watch everything. He will watch people, he will watch events, he will watch the turning of the tides of the culture and the society that he lives in. He will assess the situation in every angle that someone possibly can, and then make the plans he needs to achieve his goals. In doing this, he is not cruel, sadistic, selfish, or really any other negative word I could put on him. He can be brutal and he can be cold, but it's only ever to fulfill his goals. The words good and evil don't even enter his vocabulary, and it's not just because he can't fucking speak English. Far more important to him is the word duty. We see him throughout the story plan out the deaths of his close friends, people who when they die make him actually shed a tear for their loss, but he knows that they need to die in order for his goals to be achieved. And there isn't even any sort of real malice here, because most of the people that he orders to their death are perfectly willing to sacrifice themselves for him because they feel that level of loyalty and trust for him. Even the guy that Toronaga was executing, the guy that betrayed him like 5 times. Toranaga kept this guy around and allowed him to continuously betray him over and over again because this person being around was serving Toranaga's goals. In fact, it's revealed that pretty much every single betrayal that this guy does to Toranaga was something that he knew was going to happen and purposely set up the opportunity for this person to betray him because it fed right back into what he wanted. Toranaga is insanely good at reading people, understanding what it is they want, and then putting events into play that will lead to those people making decisions that he knows they're going to make because he was so good at studying them in the first place. And despite those people thinking that they're going up against Toranaga, it flips right back around to being exactly what Toranaga wanted in the first place. The dude is playing like fucking 12D chess. And he's playing it in a universe where basically everybody there is already playing 4D chess. Imagine you're watching Game of Thrones, right? And there's all these different people vying for the throne. Some people are doing it via power and force. Some people are doing it through being clever, like Tyrion and stuff like this. And you have all these different crazy personalities all coming together to see who will win. And they're all sort of just kind of challenging one another. And the show is focusing on all these different characters, right? That's Game of Thrones. Now imagine you have one dude that you throw in the show and you follow that person solely, and that person is infinitely more intelligent and competent than literally all of the Game of Thrones characters combined. That's Shogun, and that's Yoshii Toronaga. That is exactly what would happen if you took Toronaga and threw him into Game of Thrones. He's smarter than they are. He's more patient than they are. He's even shown an adaptability to be able to overcome cultural differences between multiple different groups of people who he should have no ability to understand whatsoever. He takes it upon himself to educate himself and understand his enemies and the things that they want, solely so he can use those things against him. He is a perfect player in the Game of Thrones. And I don't think that there's anyone here who could really overcome him. I mean, think about what actually happens by the end of Shogun. I've heard a lot of people didn't actually like the ending of Shogun, which I find is a little odd. The thing that they say they don't like about it is that the entire show is building up to an inevitable war between Toranaga and the other clans. And then the war never actually happens because Toranaga makes a bunch of crazy plays that takes away all of his opponent's options. And then when they actually meet on the field of battle, everyone fucking abandons the main dude who's going to war with Toranaga, and he loses all his people, so he just surrenders before a battle even starts. And I'm thinking to myself by this complaint, were you guys not watching the same fucking show I was? This is the culmination of everything we've seen. We know that Toranaga can't win in an outright battle against these people because he's completely outnumbered in terms of troops. The entire show is about him having to overcome this. The fact that he was able to win a war against several other clans and insurmountable odds without ever actually having to even step foot on a battlefield in the first place shows just how fucking good he is at his commanding post. It's super impressive and absolutely fits with the story of the show. Are you kidding me? Yeah, overall, I don't think there's absolutely anything that anyone here can do. I think even the absolute best players of the game do not stand a chance against Toranaga. There are a couple of different cool combinations I would like to see. Like, it would be cool to see Toranaga come into contact with someone like Tywin. I think there would be some super interesting conversations as long as they have a translator. And just watching those two play off each other would be very interesting. But even with situations like that, I still think that Toranaga's ability to very quickly understand exactly the type of person that he's talking to at all times is far superior to that of Tywin's. And Toranaga's going to be able to deal with Tywin far easier than Tywin's going to be able to deal with Toranaga. Toranaga's going to start pulling out some shit that Tywin's never seen before. And that's really going to be the case with literally every character this motherfucker comes across. But that's all I got for you today. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, comment, share, and join the membership. Remember, if you join the membership, you get videos early. And always remember, y'all stay safe out there, you hear?